We will continue our lecture with this second chapter. Chapter 2, we're going to talk about the evolution itself. So this is just telling you the history of the evolutional theory, so the theory of evolution. So starting within about 400 before Christ, okay, Aristotle's already tried to identify a different type of organisms, species, and he actually concluded that the same species, they have the same basic character, physical character for some, and they are identicals in many characters, and definitely, member of the species, they very similar, and in any places, in any condition, they kind of unchanging. So they are kind of similar, the same. Okay, and then uh, in year 1749, Buffon, uh, he kind of have an idea that the species actually changing from time to time or through the generations. That's the first idea that actually coming, that there is kind of idea of speciation. And then Hutton in 1785 again is very similar. He noticed, or he had the idea that there is a changings of species due to the natural forces. Okay, there's a natural gradual changes in this species. And then Cuvier in 1798, he mentioned that species are recreated after catastrophes, fossil reef presence extinction. So again, he has the idea this is changings in a species and the idea of evolution. Lamarck in 1809, he actually have a very similar idea with Darwin, that there is a natural selections that will change species, or will create a species that will be adapted to the natural conditions. So we're going to see the different idea between Lamarck and Darwin. Both of them actually have the same idea, that there is a natural forces. There is a natural selection that will create the species that is adapted to that natural condition. In 1830, Lyell, okay, he also had the idea that there is a changings in nature, and it is gradual change, which is basically this is talk about evolutions. And of course, Darwin, okay, in 1859, he made a study in Galapagos Islands that actually become the kind of the birth of the evolution itself. So since that one, okay, Darwin is considered as the father of evolution, because he actually able to explains the process of evolutions clearly. Okay, so this the kind of history process of evolution theory. Now we gonna talk a little bit about Darwin. Again, Darwin, he was a naturalist, and when he was only 22 years old, he went to the explorations with the HMS Beagles in 1831, and they visited the Galapagos Islands. Right now, Galapagos Island is uh, in Ecuador. So Ecuador is the country that has the or control the Galapagos Islands now. So during his study, he found out so many different species, especially like a tortoise, finches, birds, and he noticed that this bird they are actually very similar, but with different type of beaks, size, and also thickness. Uh, that making him believe that this bird actually coming from the same ancestor, and the same ancestor, okay, the same common ancestor is actually coming from the mainland. So the mainlands over here in South America, the first or the ancestor of finches on the Galapagos Islands actually flew to this island and stayed there. And then after several generations, is creating different species because this uh, member of population, okay, the member of species in these populations have different way to choose their food, and then it's causing their genetics, and they tend to go to the one that is more adapted for that specific food. So this speciation is due to the natural selection that they have to be adapted to different type of food sources that they eat. So this is the study done by Darwin's on that time in the Galapagos Island. Now, as I mentioned before, that both Darwin and Lamarck have the idea that the evolution of the speciation is caused by natural selection. So this nature will select which individual, which organism that will be most adapted to the environment. And this is the one that will be stay, that will be exist, and the one that do not adapt it to the natural condition or natural selection will be extinct. So now look at the different over here. In Lamarck evolutions, we're gonna have these examples over here with the giraffe. Okay, according to Lamarck, the giraffe actually have the same character. In this case, if we look at the neck of the giraffe, so there are, of course, in a population, there are many organisms, the same species, and all of them have the same size of neck. So if you see here, the same size of neck or the same length of necks. So according to Lamarck, because they have to reach higher leaf, okay, for their food, then what happened? Little by little, after generation, their neck become longer. Okay, so you see that difference. And then after generations, what happens? Their neck is long now. So this is the one that exists in this environment right now, which is long neck of the giraffe. This is the theory of evolution by Lamarck. And he actually mentioned that acquired characteristic are inherited. Okay, so the characteristic that acquired because of this uh, action, activity, which is stretching the neck become longer, and the long neck, then it will be inherited. That's what Lamarck say about the evolution. Now, how about Darwin? How about Darwin? So Darwin actually gave the better idea, and this is more logical compared to Lamarck. Look what Darwin mentioned about speciations, about evolution. So according to Darwin's, within the populations, the same species, there are varieties. Okay, there are varieties. Like there are some giraffe that has long neck. There are some that have medium neck or short neck. Okay, so there are variety. I think this is logical because if we look at human, for example, we have variety, different skin color, different hair color, different body shape, different height, and etc. Right? So that's different. And he mentioned that because of the scarcity of the food, okay, the one that have long neck will be adapted to the environment, while the one that have short necks, they will die because they will not be able to reach the food, so they will be starvation and they will be die. So the one that left, is actually the one have long. Within this population also, there are some giraffe that have longer neck, a shorter neck, but all of these giraffe basically will have a long neck. And as we see over here, Darwin actually mentioned that the genetic that long neck, the giraffe long neck have, is actually already there. It will be inherited to their offsprings on the next generation. So is the gene is does not change because of stretching, for example, like what Lamarck said. And again, if we think logically, what Lamarck say, it is actually as if we are saying that the bodybuilder, remember their muscle is really big because of what? Because they do bodybuilder, they do exercise that make their muscle bigger. If we follow the Lamarck theory, it means that their kids, okay, will have bigger muscle when they born, and actually not. So what happens when the bodybuilder have kids? The kids, they have the small muscle. If they want to be having bigger muscle, then they have to follow their father, okay, to do exercise or to do the activities that make or increase the muscle size. So these are the difference between evolutionary theory between Lamarck and Darwin. And again, the most logical, the most accepted theory is actually Darwin evolution theory. So again, both of them use the same force, which is natural selection. The difference is Lamarck said that acquired characteristic will be inherited, while Darwin said that no, within the population, there are different characters. The one that have more adapted character, it is the one that will be staying in the habitat. And uh, it will give that gene, inherited that gene to their generation. Okay, I hope you do understand this difference between Lamarck and Darwin natural selection theory. Now, again, the main force of evolution and speciation is what we call the natural selection. It's worked by this one. So the individual that fit with the environment, that well adapted with the environment, is the one that will be exist. The one that do not adapt it with the environment, it will be gone. So natural selection, then we can put adaptation over here again. Natural selection and adaptation. Due to the natural selection, there are some individual that adapt to that condition. Now, these are the postulates that Darwin gave regarding to this natural selection. Again, first, most characters are heritable, inherited, passed from parents to their offspring. Like the giraffe that have long neck will pass that characteristic, the long neck characteristic, to their offspring. The giraffe that have short neck, then it will pass the gene to their offspring. Okay, so the characteristic is inherited. And the characteristics often vary. Again, even though the parent have a long neck, both parents say have a long neck, sometimes within their offsprings, there are some offspring that have longer neck, or there are some offspring that have shorter necks. There is always variability. And if we talk about the reproductions, the meiosis. Okay, if you learn about the process of meiosis, which is production of sperms and the eggs, and then after that fertilization, then you should be able to see over there that within the same family, the children will not be the same because what there is a crossing over during the prophase one that causes the sperm and the eggs carry variables of genes, and it will show up on the children. So no child will be the same like their siblings. There are several similarity, but there is always variability because of this. So that's what Darwin mentioned, which is true, which is true within the family. The children will not be exactly the same. So there are variability, maybe the skin color, the height, the the ear type, the eye color, and so on. Okay, more offspring are produced. Uh, this is actually about survival. Okay, so why animal have more offspring they produce? Because the offspring have to be adapted with the uh, natural condition. They have a lot of changes to be survived. So therefore, there will be more offspring that will produce than the one that can survive. Basically, there are some offspring that will die in the way. That not all of them will be survived. If all of them survive, that's good. But basically, the animals always produce more offspring than they can survive. Because what? Because again, they have to be adapted with the environment, and also uh, there will be competition for the resources. This is part of adaptation too, and this is part of the natural selection too. Okay, so this is the three postulates of Darwin theory, which is the natural selection. First, most characteristics will be inheritable, and then the characteristic of offspring will be vary, and then there will be more offspring produced that can be survived because for challenges, for competition, for adaptation. Now, again, we're gonna continue with the natural selection, adaptation, and speciation. Again, the main force for evolution is natural selection. The individual that adapt to this natural selection, it will stay, or even it can branching into different species, creating a new species. And this is what we call as a speciation. Speciation is creation of new species from the same ancestor. So one ancestor can create maybe two, three, four species. And again, this process is called the speciation. Now, what Darwin observed on the Galapagos Island is the finches bird over here. So finches from the Galapagos archipelago or the island. And he noticed that there are several types of finches over here with a bigger beak, smaller, and even this one is small but longer and thinner beak. And it is it is a species. He uh, have an idea that this happening because of the speciations. So one ancestor creating this different type of species with different type of beak because of the adaptation through the natural selection, adaptation to the natural forces. Okay, so look at this. This is just the illustration, and this is the real photo of these different fences. Okay, now he noticed that the one that have thicker, shorter beak is actually ground fences. So they mostly they have a role. Remember when we talk about habitats and needs? So this role, the needs of this group of thicker fences, thicker big fences is actually on the ground. They actually eating the seed on the ground. So that's the reason why their beak is bigger, thicker, adapted to open the seed. Okay, the hard seed, for example. The woodpecker is a like a long uh, beak over here. Okay, to find the food within the bark of the tree. So the woodpecker, and then the cactus. Look at the cactus one. It has a very long beak, and then kind of thinner in order to be able to go between the spine or the thorn of the cactus to find their food. So this is again adaptations to their natural selection. And Darwin theorized that these birds are or were coming from the same ancestor. And their common ancestor is actually coming from the mainland. So that's the Darwin study in Galapagos Island about this natural selection, adaptation, and speciation. Now, there is another naturalist that also study about speciation. His name is Wallace. This is Alfred Wallace. He studied in Southeast Asia country, especially in Indonesia. So he noticed that western part of Indonesia have a very different type of animals or species compared to the eastern part of Indonesia. And he noticed more that the western part of Indonesia, if you know, Indonesia is actually islands, okay, islands, the western part, the islands on the western part, they actually have the animal that very similar with the animals on the Asian continent. In Thailand, in India, for example, in the western part of Indonesia, they have tiger. And tiger also presence in Asia continent. They have elephant that also presence in Asia continent. Okay, like in Thailand, India, they have elephant. Indonesia islands on the western part also have the elephant. On the eastern part of Indonesia, okay, well, let's find out that the animals So mostly, he learned studied about the animal because this is the one that give a very clear characteristic, distinctive characteristic. Yeah. So the eastern islands of Indonesia, it has animals that actually very similar with the animals in the Australia continent. Okay, so mostly marsupials, the one that have pocket, okay, on their belly for development of their babies. Okay, so marsupial and different type of birds that also similar with the Australian birds, Australian animal. And Wallace noticed that, there is a different species, different ancestor, that makes speciations in the eastern part of Indonesia and the one that makes species or speciation in the western part of Indonesia. So most of the ancestor in the western part is going to be the same ancestor with the Asian continent animal. And on the eastern part, it will be the same as the ancestor that uh, produce the speciations in Australia continent. Okay, so again, this is the both of them study the natural selection, as well as more to the biogeography, okay, which is the speciation based on different type of geographical area. And both of them actually wrote the scientific papers on this natural selection, and both of them presenting, these papers in the meeting, we call the Linnean Society in 1858. I said both of them have the same idea about speciation due to natural selection. Now, look at the natural selections now. We're gonna learn about the natural selection. So natural selection is the force that will create the species or that will force individual to be adapt to the specific natural condition. There are three type of natural selection. Okay, so there are three type of natural selection. The first one is called the stabilizing selection. This is natural force that will make a species population to be, within the stable, the most optimum condition. If we see, like say, we have the original. Let's say this is original population over here, which is before the natural selection. So mostly the animals, the populations within this same. Let's say we say this is based on a number of eggs produced. Okay, let's say over here, okay, the bird only produce. Let's say this is one. Let's say this is three. This is five. This is, let's say, seven. Right. So dominantly, okay, the birds, okay, most of the bird they produce egg within 3 to 5, in average 4 over here. Let's say this is average 4. This is the most abundant member of species on that population, which is produce 4 eggs. Okay, now there are some bird that also produce one or maybe two or maybe six or maybe seven, yeah, less or more than 4. Okay, however, after the natural selection, okay, because there is a selection, there is a force that happening to them. Now this curve is become kind of uh, shorter. It's not wider, but it's become smaller. Okay. Now, instead of between 1 to 7 eggs per member, now it's just 3 to 6. I mean 3 to 5. The one that produce one and two, they actually die because they cannot adapt to the force of natural selection. And the one that produce six and seven also unable to live, they die. So this force, this natural selection causing this population become only producing between 3 to 5, with the most abundant one still the same, which is 4. And this is what we call the stabilizing selection. It will go to the stable condition. Now, look at the second type over here. It's called the directional selection. Okay, so directional first. Let's say this is the first, the original population over here. Mostly the light color moth live on that habitat. Okay, let's say there is a force. Let's say there is pollution. Okay, is air pollution that causing that place become darker. The place become darker. Remember, even though in the original condition, there are moth that is light. This one are gonna be very light, very lighter, and there are darker over here, right? Just focus in this original over here. And most of them, let's say, gray, okay? Grayish color between light and darker. Okay, so the stable environment, the stable population will be within this light and dark. This is original. There is original population. Let's say there is a force. There is a natural force, as I mentioned before. There is a pollution, air pollution that causing that area become darker. And what happens? It will make the moth that is darker to be able to camouflage with the environment, and it will not be choose uh, chosen by the predator. Basically, the darker one will be more in number now. The lighter one, they gone because they become victim of the predations, because now, because their light color is easy to be found by the predator, while the darker color will not be easy to be eaten or found by the predator. Now, what happened? That population now shifting, okay, from a lighter color to darker color because of the natural force, the pollution. And this is what we call the directional. Yeah. Let's say, people clean up the place. Now the area is become lighter again. So the pollution is gone. Okay. The area is become lighter. It might go back again to the left direction. Okay, so this is what we call direction. Maybe go to the left, maybe go to the right population. Okay, so this is directional selection. Again, when you observe the animal, for example, in the fields, let's say in the forest, look at their color and then try to, uh, you know, uh, make a correlation between this color with the predation, maybe with the natural force that may be present for that kind of animal. Okay, so that's the directional selection. The last one is called the diversifying selection. Okay, so for this one, the original population is actually split. Yeah, it's actually split, okay, into the left and the right at the same time. Okay, not to the left, then to the right, but left and right at the same time. The stable one, the most abundant one, is actually now become the least abundant one. It's going down in number because of the natural force, natural selection. Okay, look at this picture. Let's say this is original. Okay, this is the original population. Most of them have the white color. This is the most abundant one over here has the white color. Suddenly, there is a force, let's say a natural force happening here. Let's say there is a predations that only choose the white color rabbit. Okay, remember in the original population over here, there are rabbit that is darker. There are rabbit that has white and black over here, white and black. So in this place, okay. So this place is white and black, and this one is for darker, and the whole thing over here for the white rabbit. Okay, that's going to be the most abundant one. And if there is the force, let's say the predator that come on the eat the white one, and what happened? The white one will be down or even maybe gone. Now, which one's gonna be more populated? It's gonna be the left one, the darker one, and also the right one, the white and black color rabbit. So this is what we call the diversifying selection, where the original population is gonna be diversifying into the left and the right, the one that used to be less in number. Now both of them become higher in number. The one that used to be abundance in the middle will be going down to be the least abundance groups. Okay. So that's the different type of selection, natural selection. Okay. And just remember, okay, the natural selection acts on individual to affect change in population. Individual do not evolve. The one that evolve will be the population, not the individual. Okay, the individual will produce. The population is the one that actually will evolve, will change. Okay, so again, when you do observations, field observations in the field, let's say in Costa Rica forest, make sure try to look in this different type of natural selection. Try to make a connection between the animals that you observe and the probability of the type of maybe speciation or natural selection that happened to this specific species. Okay. Now, is evolution true or no? And this is the reason why you have to read the textbook. Okay. The textbook that I assigned for you to read it. Read that one to make sure you do understand whether evolution is true or not. Now, there are some evidence. Okay, there are some evidence of evolution. Mostly in the book, it's mentioned about main one. There are four main evidence of evolution. The first one, of course, is the fossil records. So fossil records actually showing us that there used to be animals or there used to be organisms that live on Earth that's really different character with us, maybe different size, different bones, different things, okay, different shape and etc. And that individual is not exist anymore, but they used to be there. Okay, the record, the fossil telling you there used to be kind of organism that live on Earth that look like that, but it's no longer there. But there are the animal that live today, they have some similarity with the fossil record. Then it's telling us maybe the one that live now is actually changed from the one that used to live before. Okay? There is a gradual change. The one that live now is the one that's adapted, and the one that in the fossil is the one that's already extinct. Okay, so that's the first evidence. The second evidence is if we observe the structure, what we call the anatomy, okay, this body structure, let's say the easiest one is animals because they have a very distinctive body structure, yeah, organs, different organs. This is more difficult if we study the plants because most plants they look very similar. But animals, they have a very distinctive body structure that make us easy to study them, to observe the difference between one group to the other group. Okay? So this body structure, what we call the anatomy, can be used also as the evidence of evolution. What is that? First, is the homologous structure. Homologous structure mean the structure that very similar, even though maybe the shape is not the same, but the member or the organs, the tissue or maybe uh, part of organ that make that specific shape, okay, structure are the same. Examples, if we want to compare the structure, let's say between human upper arm over here with the, let's say, cow front leg, front leg. It look different, right? It look different. But if we study the bones, they actually the same. So the bones of our upper end consists of the humerus. So there is a humerus bone, okay, and then radius and ulna, okay, and there is a carpal bone, okay, and then after that there is a metacarpal, and then after that there will be phalanges or digit. Okay, so there is humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Okay, that's the structure of human upper limb. Okay, now look at the cow. It's the same actually. It has humerus and then radius ulna. Okay, and then they also have carpals, metacarpal, and phalanges. Maybe only two phalanges instead of 14 in human, but still have the same humerus, radius ulna, carpal, metacarpal, and the phalanges. Okay, this is front legs. Okay, cow or dogs or cats. So this is what we call the homologous structure. The structure that homo mean the same. The structure that's the same uh, with different species. It is telling us, okay, that there is evidence, there is evolution. It's meaning it as us, like human, cow, cat, uh, what is lions, dogs, for example, they might have or they have the common ancestor. Okay, the common ancestors. Okay, that will create or produce these different species. Again, this is what we call the homologous structure, which is similarity of structure within different species that telling us there is evolution, that they share the same common ancestor. Okay, so the same common ancestor. Okay, vestigial structure. There are some vestigial structure that's telling us there is a evolution, there is connection with this animal that have vestigial structure with other animal that do not have vestigial structure. For example, human have appendix, which is this is vestigial structure. We don't need that. That's the reason why it's become vestigial. Vestigial mean become small or short because it's never being used for a long time. But for the animal that eat the plant, for example, okay, vegetable, they they do not have vestigial structure, but they have the structure uh, uh, that able to digest the cellulose, for example. And this is actually the in us in human become vestigial structure because it's never been used. Another example is if we see in boa constrictor, which is big snake, if we see on the abdomen, okay, of that animal, we will find a short leg. It's showing us that this animal used to have the legs, just like their relative, which is the reptile, okay, like the lizard, for example. But because it's never been used for a long time, that legs is become vestigial. So it's vestigial legs on boa constrictor, snake. Okay, this is another evidence of evolution based on this anatomy. So homologous structure, vestigial structure is based on the anatomy. Now, how about this? The last one over here is based on the embryology. So embryogenesis. So if we look closely with the embryology, okay, embryogenesis of, let's say, fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, and mammals, they are on the first stages. They are very, very similar. All of them have tail. All of them have gill slit, for example, and continuously. And all of them have somites that will become muscle later. At the end, they are become different, but at the early stage of embryogenesis, their structure is really the same. What is telling us there is evolution, there is speciation, and telling us that they share the same common ancestor. Okay, so this is evident based on the embryogenesis. Now, biogeography. We already mentioned about Wallace, Alfred Wallace, that studied animals in the western islands of Indonesia and the eastern islands of Indonesia. They are different. And when he observed the western island have a similar type of animals with the Asian continent. And the Eastern Island have the same type of animals with the Australia continent. Is telling us there is this biogeography is creating this evolution, different species that presence on that place. The western part will have the same common ancestor of uh, their parents with the Asian continent. The eastern part of Indonesia will have the same common ancestor with the animals in the uh, Australia continent. Okay, so we're gonna learn this later again because there used to be splits in the earth that causing the earth become like now with several continents, at least six or five continents, and then many islands. And the animals that live on the continents, they are kind of different from one another, but sometimes they are the same to one another. And this is based on the biogeography, their location. And the last one, this is the newest one. Okay, during the Darwin era, they don't have this study yet, which is based on the molecular biology. In this case, mostly based on the DNA contents. And based on the DNA contents, then the one that have close relative, maybe close ancestor, they will have very similar DNA contents. Okay, maybe 99%, 95% similarity, and etc. The one that farther away will have less similarity, maybe 50%. Like for example, between animal and plants, their similarity may be only 50%, 60%. But within the animal, maybe they up to 7%, 70%, 80%. But if they are the same group of classification or taxon, their DNA or molecular biology may be very, very similar, up to, for example, 95, 98% maybe similarity. Okay, so this is telling us the evidence of this speciation, the idea of the common ancestor within the same taxon or the closest taxons of organism. Okay, again, fossil record. This is just several of them that we will show in this class. This is the fossil of Archaeopteryx fossil. Okay, this fossil, based on the fossil that they found, is kind of weird. Right? It's kind of weird because in this fossil, these animals, it is considered have the wing in it. Yeah, it's just like bird. However, they have some characteristic of reptile on their legs and also on the beak over here. So the beak actually have teeth, instead of, in the modern bird, there is no teeth on the beak. But in this fossil, it has teeth in the beak. It is kind of showing us there is a combination between reptile and bird in this fossil. Okay, so many scientists believe that this fossil is actually the ancestor of birds that coming from the reptile. So reptile is considered as a lower, uh, more primitive group of organism compared to bird. So from reptile, it will evolve. Some of them evolve to bird. Some of reptile, evolve to mammals. So mammals also consider is coming from the reptile. Right? So this fossil again, kind of the evidence of these evolutions of bird from reptile. Now, based on that fossil, so when they found the fossil, they actually able to calculate the the age of the soil, of or the fossil, based on the environment, the soil where the fossil is located. So scientists able to calculate, able to count the age of the soil using some uh, materials, like, for example, carbon dating. Okay, using the carbon dating, they're able to kind of guess or give the calculation of the age of that soil, and then the age of that fossil, when that fossil actually present. So based on these calculations, then scientists divided our Earth into four era. Okay, this is what we call the geological time scale. Okay, so the first era, this is when the Earth formed. Okay, it's about 4,570 million years ago. So MYE over here means millions years ago. So according to that calculations, the Earth is actually formed about 4,570 million years ago. And then after that, in this 3,500 million years ago, the old prokaryote. So prokaryote is considered as the most primitive one. This is considered as the first cell. Sometimes we call it protobionts. Okay, so the first cell that evolved, and then from this, that's going to be evolved to different type of cell diversity, like gonna be protists, for example. So protists come after prokaryote. Protists, they are already eukaryote. What is eukaryote mean? Eukaryote mean the cell that have nucleus. Okay, so prokaryote over here, their cell do not have nucleus, and all of them unicellular. Okay, unicellular. But protists over here, they are already eukaryote. Some of them unicellular, some of them multicellular. Already have many cells in one organism. And then continue to the next era. So this first era over here is called the Precambrian era. And this era, the Earth form, the prokaryote present, and then evolve. Some of them evolve into protists within the same era. Prokaryotes still live until now. It means that they actually have been living for million years. The second era is called the Paleozoic. Okay, Paleozoic era. And again, it start from this over here, from the protists. They become evolve into some invertebrate. So invertebrates, mostly small animal or organism, they do not have a backbone. Okay, it's evolved from the protists. It is happening in this Cambrian period. Okay, 540 and 588 million years ago. And then continuously here, okay, more vertebrate, different type, variety of vertebrate evolve. But after that, there is a mass extinction. So this is the first mass extinction. About 57% of marine species, they go or they went extinct. And after that, is evolve, the one that still life exists. They have also evolution to create this different of organism. And then the second mass extinctions over here is happening, okay, during the uh, between the Devonians and Carboniferous era or period. So we see the Devonian era or period. But 50% of coastal and marine species, they also extinct, they're gone. Okay. Uh, the cause of this extinction is not known very well. Maybe because of uh, too hot or maybe too cold, or there is something that causing this 50% of organism gone or extinct during that time. And then the one that's still alive, then okay, evolve into many different type of organism now. We start to see the insect, we start to see the amphibians, the reptiles over here. They are flourished during this era, during the Carboniferous and Permian era. But after that, there is another mass extinctions. It's great dying, about 83% of all species of land and sea, they extinct. So again, there are some possibilities, there are some opinions about this mass extinction. What is the cause of this mass extinction? But again, any reason still telling us during that time, 83% species extinct due to this is the second, the third mass extinctions. Now go to the third era. It's called the Mesozoic era. Now this is when the reptiles is actually flourish. There are so many of them. Okay, the time is called the Triassics. And then after that, there is another mass extinctions, about 48 species of organism extinct. This is the fourth mass extinction that happening, that happens in this earth. And then after that, the one that's still alive, they also evolve, creating this many dinosaurs. And now, this is the time when the dinosaurs really, really flourish. It's called the Jurassic. That's the reason why we has a movie called the Jurassic Park. It's actually recreating the environment during the Jurassic period in the Mesozoic era, where the dinosaurs are or were flourish. Okay? And then after that, Cretaceous, and during that time, there is another mass extinction. This is the fifth mass extinction. And this is right now is considered is the last. We don't know if there will be the sixth mass extinction or not. Some people say that there might be because of the political condition. Maybe the fifth mass extinctions will be nuclear war or something like that. But again, so far there are five mass extinction on Earth. Now we go to the last era. It's called the Cenozoic era. Now many mammals it start to flourish. Okay, monkey, squirrels, and then human. Okay, also it's called the hominids. Okay, the ancestor of humans. They start to evolve during this time. Yeah? And then the modern human, which is us, is considered just evolved about 0.01 million years ago. If we calculate this, is maybe around uh, 10,000 to 100 thousands years ago. Okay, so it's a new. We are inhabiting this world, or we are present in this earth just less than 100,000 or 50,000 years ago. So compared to the dinosaurs that actually they live for about 2 million years. So we are still a new type of organism that actually evolve or adapt to our Earth ecosystem, our Earth condition right now. And we are considered as the best adapted organism right now on Earth. Okay. Okay. Now, based on the anatomy, the evidence based on the anatomy, again, I already mentioned to you about homologous structure, which is the structure that similar from one species to another species, that telling us or give the evidence they have or they share the same common ancestor. So the species actually evolve from the same common ancestor. Like humans, dog, front leg, for example, birds, wings, and whale pins, the pectoral pins, the pectoral fin, they actually consist of the same bone. So this one is humerus. So this is humerus. All of this is humerus. And then radius ulna, these two radius ulna. And then carpal. And then metacarpal, and then phalanges. Human have five. Dogs maybe three. Uh, uh, Bird only one. One, two, three, four. One, two, three. This one, the whale, maybe have different number of digit or phalanges, but they are the same structure, showing us the same structure, what we call the homologous structure. And again, this is evidence that they are evolved from the same common ancestor. They share the same common ancestor. Again, vestigial structure. We mentioned about appendix and also this boa constrictor vestigial legs. So this leg is never being used, then it's become very, very small. It's still there. In most of the snake, this vestigial leg already gone. But this big snake, okay, the boa constrictor snake, they actually still have these vestigial legs. And again, this is that's the reason why, the snakes and the lizard, they are the same class, which is reptilia, yeah, the reptile, even though it's look very different, snake and lizard. But if we go here, look at this leg, oh, there is connection there. There is connection there. So they actually share the same common ancestor that make them to be put in the same class, which is reptilia. Okay, they even put in the same order actually the lizard, okay, and the snake is in the squamata order. And this is evidence based on the embryological development, embryogenesis. And again, if we look at the first, the early stage over here, okay, it's kind of very similar. Okay, maybe at the last stage is a little bit different, but on the first stages, early stages, the development are really, really similar. And this again evidence that these animals they share the same common ancestor. Salamander, tortoise, chick, hog, calf, rabbit, human, they consider having the same or sharing the same common ancestor. Again, the next one is biogeography as evidence of evolution. Yeah. Now, based on the calculations, estimations that our Earth, the Earth used to be one big land. It's called the Pangaea. Pangaea or Pangaea is a big one solid land of Earth. Okay, and then it will split. The big one land will be splitting, become many continents. And then within continents, there are also splittings to create many islands and etc. Okay, so based on this, then we can actually observe the organism, especially the animals that live on that places, and try to make comparison between one island with another island with the continent, one continent with another continent. Then it's showing there is a evidence that they are correlated, they are related, they are sharing the same common ancestor within the same places, the same area, the same continent. The island that close to the continent, for example, the mainland, they're sharing that. So it's a evidence for this. Look at this one. This is the idea of one line of Earth. It's called the Pangaea. It's about after the formation. Remember, after the formation of the Earth, about 4,570 million years ago. It's creating this one big land. It's called the Pangaea. So Pangaea is a one land for all. So it's all of those connected. It means that there are, let's say, animals that live here. The early animals that live here, they are correlated. Okay, they are maybe correlated because they're able to connect. There is no separation between them. So they are connected. They maybe have the same ancestor or samples. Okay. Now what happens after that? There is what we call the continental drift. This is a theory that that saying that our Earth, the land, the plate, uh, is actually moving, always moving. The creating, the movement, it might split, split the land. So this is what we call the continental drift. This this gradual movement or drifting of the land, creating different land mass. This is happening at least maybe 65 million years ago, this drifting of land moving around, okay, causing the Pangea is split into many massive lands. It's become continents later. eh? And then what happened with that massive lands area? Yeah, after continuations of the continental drift, now we have this we have this Earth that we have now, the lands on the Earth. So basically, it will be divided into several continents. Like this one is the America continents that can be divided into North America and South America. What? South America, North America. In Asia, for example, is divided into this Asia over here, okay, Eastern, Western, okay, this is Asia continent, including this island over here, is a Asia continent, and then the Africa, okay, the African continents over here. So this is Africa, this is Asia, and this is Australia. Okay, Australia, and this is Europe. Yeah, Europe. At least one, two, three, four, five continent. If we split the North America and South America, it's going to be seven continents. And within continents, you see these islands, 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 so many islands. Yeah? And again, the animal that live in these islands will if we observe them, it will telling us there is correlation between animal here, maybe with the animal in this continent. And animal on the eastern part here is actually have correlation with the animals in Australia. Why? Because that split. Okay, this island is actually splitting from Australia. The western part of Indonesia is just splitting from Asia continent. And this is the Wallace study. He mentioned that the western part of Indonesia, so Western Indonesia, yeah, they have several big islands like Borneo, Java, and Sumatra. And if you look at the animal over here, eh, like tiger, uh, rhino, elephant, we have elephant here in Sumatra, will be very similar with the animals in the Asian continent. And Wallace uh, suggested that this animal have the same ancestor with the animals on the Asian continent. Look at the eastern part, okay, Sulawesi over here. This is Nusa Tenggara. This is New Guinea, okay, including Philippines actually, okay, it's over here. Okay? So Philippines is another country but consists of many islands also. So just for information, Indonesia have more than 17,000 uh, islands. Okay, so Indonesia have more than 17,000 islands, some on the western part, on the eastern part. Okay, now what happened here actually when the split, we actually have this deep, very deep trends in the ocean, and this is Pacific. This is a Pacific Ocean. Very deep trends. It's actually telling us this going here used to be Asia, And this over here is used to be part of the Australia. And this diff trends, very diff trend is separated. And this diff trend is known as the Wallace line. Okay, so this is telling us, yes, there is a separation of uh, Australia continent and Asian continents over here using this line. And again, this deep line, the line can be observed in the bottom of the ocean, which is a very deep trends. This is one of the deepest trends is actually located in this Wallace line, about 10,000 meter deep. Okay, so that's biogeography, the evidence of evolution based on the biogeography. And again, telling us the animal here have the same or sharing the same common ancestor with the Asian. The animal in this island sharing the common ancestor with the animals in the Australia continents. Okay. Again, the last one, evidence is coming from the molecular biology. DNA now is being used for identification of species, the relationship between one species to another species. Even it can be used to know relations between human, between the baby and the father, for example. Between, if there is a doubt that the baby is not someone's baby, for example, they can do the DNA test to see the correlations. Okay, so DNA now is used for proving. There is an evidence of correlationship. There is an evidence of common ancestor within different species. Now it's used for identifying species and correlation between one species to another species. So based on this DNA similarity or DNA data, then scientists creating this relationship. For example, let's say human, the closest based on the DNA content is actually chimpanzee. So chimpanzee is actually the closer relative to human. It's very have a very high similarity in DNA contents. Okay, and then gibbon, rhesus monkey, green monkey, capuchin. So this is the one that will maybe present in South America. Uh, in Costa Rica, maybe you will find this capuchins monkey, galago, etc. So the farther away is mean that the farther the relationship, the closer away it's gonna be, the closer the relationship. Look like for example the green monkey and rhesus monkey maybe share the same common ancestor over here. Human and chimpanzee maybe share the same common ancestor here. If we look at the gibbon, maybe they're sharing here the common ancestor. This is a common ancestor again for this one, two, three, four, five species. This is the common ancestor for one, two, three, four, five, six species. This is the common ancestor for all of this one, two, three. And maybe later it's going to be other continuously, the what is the common ancestor? When is the common? So this dot over here, this branch over here is telling us common ancestor. Okay, so this is another common ancestor, common ancestor, common ancestor, and common ancestor. This is what we call the phylogenetic tree based on the DNA structure or DNA contents. Okay, now another thing that maybe you should or you will be able to observe is the co-evolution. So co-evolution is the evolution of two, this is not only one species, but two species together because both of them, they are mutualistically need one another. So they evolve together. because of this need. Because of this need. Like, for example, between plants and animal that help the plant reproduce is called the pollinator, but the pollinator get the nutrients from the plant. So these pollinators and specific type of plant, they co-evolve together. This is what we call the co-evolution. Maybe in Costa Rica, when we visit the butterfly uh, field, we're gonna see that co-evolution between butterfly and the type of plants that produce the nectar that have the flowers that is actually uh, kind of favored by the different or specific type of butterfly. So you will have that kind of observations in the field. Okay, and the same with other type of coevolution between, for example, the hummingbirds with different type of plants, flower. Yeah, they co evolute. Okay, co-evolution. And then predation also give kind of, this is a, predation is actually kind of a natural selection, natural force that make some plant or some animal to protect themselves, right, through this predation. The male predation is not only animal to animal, but also animal to plants. So herbivore is considered as predator for plants. That's the reason why the plants, because of this predation, they produce metabolites. Yeah, it's called the alkaloids that actually protect them from being eaten by the herbivore. Some plant, for example, produce nicotine. This actually alkaloid protect this plant from predation. Opium. So if the plant, the animal eat this plant, for example, they will be dizzy. They will be kind of confused because of this opium. Caffeine, really, really, really bitter. So the herbivore will not eat that plant, for example, because of caffeine production. Cocaine, this coca leaf produce capsaicin. This is really spicy. This is in peppers, for example, they produce this capsaicin and many more. And this is type of predation. Again, in the fields of illustration, try to see this connection with organism, with species have this ability to protect themselves against predations. With species, two species, for example, have the co-evolutions in the field observation. Also in the animal, they protect themselves against predation, like using camouflage or mimicry. Yeah, now what is the difference between camouflage and mimicry? We're gonna see that on the next slide. Okay, but the animal have the ability to hide themselves by maybe camouflaging or do the mimicry. Yeah. And some also, yeah, produce the poisons, like frog, for example, and venoms like snake, for example, in order to avoid from predation or even in order to prey other animal. And this is evolution. This is evolution. That's the way they adapt to the natural selection. That's the way they adapt to the natural force. Okay. So this is evolution. Now, this is example of co-evolution. You see it's this type of insect have a very special long stilt or uh, what you call this antenna that able to get the nectar from this type of plant. And then this plant needs this animal because what? This animal may be pollinator for this specific flower plant. So this is co-evolution. This is the hummingbird and the type of flower uh, that provide the nectar for the hummingbird. The hummingbird help with the pollination. This is the bees. and the type of flower that the bees usually visit. And this is butterfly and the type of flower that butterfly visit. So this is co-evolution. Both of these species benefits one another, and it has been for many years. So they evolve together because they get benefit from evolving together. This is adaptations against predations. Again, many plants produce different type of metabolite, nicotine, caffeine, quinone. This is really bitter, usually used for malaria medicines, morphine, for example. So this is actually plant metabolite used by the plant for their protection. But again, human take it for our own benefits, making medicines or other drugs. Okay? So this alkaloid will defend this plant from this predation over here. Okay, so this are now animals. Some animal produce venom, and some animal produce poison. Now, what is the difference between venomous and poison? Venomous and poisonous. Venomous is mean that this animal have the ability to inject the the toxin from their gland into other animal. So maybe bite, sting. Okay. So when they bite, they sting, they can injecting their their venom. So that's venomous mean. Poisons, it is actually, they don't have the ability to inject the toxic materials to other animal, but that poison is actually present on their body, and the animals or maybe human get it when they touch this, touching the skin, for example, or eating this animal. So the poison will enter into the human body or the animal that eat or touch this poisonous animal. So that the difference between poisonous and venomous. Okay, again, venomous it means that it has the ability to deliver the toxin to other organism, maybe using bite or sting. Poison is just by touching it or maybe eating it, it will cause the problem. Now, I mentioned about what is the difference between camouflage and mimicry. Again, on the fields in Costa Rica, make sure you observe this. If you find some animal that have this ability, whether camouflage or mimicry. Now, what is camouflage? Easy, easy definition. Camouflage means copy, copy environment. Maybe the soil color, the plant color. So is mimicking environment. If it is mimicking environment, this is what we call the camouflage. So camouflage is mimicking their environment. They're going to be similar with the environment, like this organism, for example. Okay. So this try to mimic the bark of the tree. It's the same color, same look. That's what camouflage. Now, what is mimicry? The same, it is also copy. What they copy is actually copying other organism or part of organism that consider dangerous to predator. Copy other uh, organisms that has ability to protect. Okay, so look at this one over here. I said this animal over here. Let's say there are two types of mimicry. We're going to start with the Batesian mimicry first. Batesian mimicry is the harmless. Okay, let's say this one is the one that actually harmful. You see this thing over here? So these bees or these wasps is dangerous. Okay, this is dangerous. They can sting. They can sting. So look at this. This one is not. And look at this also. This one is not. So these two harmless insect mimic the dangerous insect over here. So the predator will think that this is dangerous. This one is also dangerous, but actually not. This is what we call the Batesian mimicry. Okay? So the copying the harmless animal or organism copying the dangerous organism to be similar. Now look at this one. This is what we call the Mullerian mimicry. All of them is actually dangerous, but they just have the same uh, type of coloration. Just like, for example, gangster. Yeah, sometimes the gangster they use the same coat of clothing. Okay, we use this clothing. This is telling us we are dangerous. So actually, each of these they are dangerous. Eh? They are dangerous, but now they copying one another to kind of give the warning to other animals, don't close to us because we are dangerous gang. Okay, we are the dangerous gangster. Okay, so I hope you will be able to distinguish between the Bartesian mimicry and the Mullerian mimicry here. Okay, so that's the difference between camouflage and mimicry, and also the difference between Bartesian and Mullerian mimicry. Right. Now, another things that also kind of be used for telling us or as evidence of evolution is artificial selection. So artificial selection, human have done this for many years to create a new species. So you see there are so many type of dogs. There are so many type of crops being made with this artificial selection. This is evolution, but in a faster way. Evolution in faster way, which is artificial selection. Instead of using natural selection, human use artificial thing to select their species or the animals that they like or the plants that they like, causing that speciation over here. Okay, so it's actually telling us, yes, evolution is actually happening. Even it can be shown in the practical things that human have done. Okay? In the farmings, for example, in cattle production, in the dogs selections, okay, breeds. So they use this type of selection or force. It's called the artificial selection. I think that's all for this second chapter. Again, there are a lot of information, but if you study it clearly, if you study it with seriously and try to make sense from that information, you should be able to understand the evolution clearly. And again, in our fields observations, we're going to use these natural selection adaptations, mimicry or camouflage, and etc. For our study about evolution, practical study of evolution in the fields, in the forests. Okay, goodbye now. See you on the next lecture.